The great hall of Thornwood Pack had never felt so cold. Wren Ashford stood before the Alpha's dais in a dress too thin for the autumn morning, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and waited for the man she had trusted to destroy her. Lord Vance Blackthorn lounged on his father's throne, one leg thrown carelessly over the arm, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was beautiful in the way of sharp things, pale eyes, aristocratic features, the easy confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in his privileged life. She had believed his whispered promises in the dark, had let herself imagine a future where someone like her could be wanted by someone like him. She had been such a fool. "Let me understand correctly," Vance said, his voice carrying easily through the assembled pack members who filled the gallery. "You claim to be carrying my child, and you expect me to what? Acknowledge this bastard? Marry a scribe's daughter?" Laughter rippled through the hall, cruel, cutting laughter that made Wren's face burn with humiliation. But she forced herself to hold Vance's gaze, refused to look away even as she felt every eye in the room boring into her like accusation. "You promised me," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "You said you loved me. You said when your father was ready to announce your heir selection, you would—" "I said many things." Vance's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked sharp in the torchlight. "As did you, as I recall." Very enthusiastically. He leaned forward on the throne, his eyes cold despite the smile twisting his handsome features. "Did you think I wouldn't see through this pathetic scheme? You spread your legs for any lordling who looked your way, and now you want to claim the Alpha's heir as the father? That's not—" Wren's voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "Vance, please, you know what happened between us. You know what I know," Vance interrupted, each word a knife. "Is that you are a liar. A common servant who thought she could trap me with false claims and rise above her station." He gestured lazily to the guards flanking the hall. "Fetch her father. Let him answer for his daughter's behavior." Aldrich Ashford was a small man, bent from decades over a copying desk, his eyes already filled with fear when the guards brought him before the dais. He didn't look at Wren. He stared at his feet, at the cold stone floor, at anything but his only daughter standing alone before her accusers. "Scribe," Vance said pleasantly, as if discussing the weather. "Your daughter has made scandalous accusations against me. As her father and guardian, you must answer for her behavior." Aldrich's Adam's apple bobbed. "My lord." "Choose carefully." Alpha Blackthorn spoke for the first time, his voice ancient and cruel from his seat beside his son. The old Alpha's eyes were filmed with age, but they missed nothing. "Your position in this pack depends on your answer, your home, your future, everything you've built." Wren watched her father's shoulders hunch further, watched the decision she dreaded form behind his eyes. She knew what was coming, had known it the moment Vance's smile turned sharp. But knowing didn't prepare her for the blow. "She is not my daughter." Aldrich's voice emerged barely above a whisper, each word like a stone dropped into still water. "I disown her before this pack, and all who witness. She is nothing to me. She has never been anything to me." The words hit Wren like physical strikes. She swayed on her feet, one hand moving instinctively to her belly where new life had been growing for nearly 5 months now. Her father still wouldn't look at her. The man who had taught her to read, who had shared his precious books with her, who had called her his little scholar and promised she could be anything, he had just erased her existence to protect his own comfort. Excellent. Vance rose from the throne, straightening his embroidered coat with fastidious care. "Then by Alpha decree, this woman is stripped of pack membership. She has until sundown to leave our territory." He paused, and his smile turned cruel, satisfied. "And if anyone aids her or gives her shelter within Thornwood lands, they'll share her fate." Wren walked out of the great hall with her head high, though everything inside her was shattered into pieces she wasn't sure she could ever reassemble. She heard the whispers following her. Liar, temptress, whore. Heard the people who had known her since childhood turning away, already pretending she didn't exist. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. Vance was laughing with his father, already having forgotten her, already moving on to the next amusement. She memorized that image, his casual cruelty, his complete indifference to the life he had ruined, and made herself a promise. She would survive this. For herself. For her child. She would survive. The roads north were cruel in autumn, and crueler still to a pregnant woman with no resources and no destination. Wren walked until her feet bled through her worn shoes, then kept walking. She slept in ditches and under bridges when she couldn't find barn lofts or abandoned sheds. She ate what she could beg or work for, washing clothes for travelers, mending torn garments, scrubbing pots in village kitchens for scraps from the evening meal. Her belly swelled beneath her increasingly ragged dress, and with each passing week, the walking became harder. She pressed her hand to her stomach sometimes, feeling the gentle movements within. Not kicks yet, but flutters. Reminders that she wasn't alone. 6 weeks after her exile, she collapsed beside a muddy road as night fell and rain began to pour. Her body had simply reached its limit. The malnutrition, the exhaustion, the constant terror had stripped away every reserve she had. She pressed her hand to her belly, willing herself to keep fighting, but her muscles refused to respond to her commands. She lay in the mud with rain washing over her face and thought about dying. It would be easy. Just close her eyes and let the cold take her. No more hunger gnawing at her belly. No more walking on bleeding feet. No more pretending she had any future worth fighting for. But she couldn't give up. Not when there was life inside her that deserved a chance. "All right," Wren whispered, pressing her hand to her belly through the soaked fabric. "All right, little one, I'm still here." But she couldn't move, couldn't force herself up from the mud. The rain kept falling, and her body was so heavy, and she was so tired of fighting. Torchlight flickered at the edge of her vision, hoofbeats splashing through puddles, voices calling out in the darkness. Someone approaching through the rain, looming over her fallen form like a shadow given substance. Wren tried to move, to run, knowing that help on the road often came with prices she couldn't pay. But her body betrayed her. She could only lie there, helpless and exposed, as a massive figure dismounted and knelt beside her in the mud. Gods above. A man's voice, rough and deep, carrying something that sounded almost like anguish. "She's pregnant and barely conscious. How long has she been out here?" "We should keep moving, my king." Another voice, sharper, more practical. "The negotiations—" "Can wait, Brennan." The first voice cut through with quiet authority that expected obedience. "Help me." Strong hands turned her over with unexpected gentleness, and Wren looked up into a face carved from nightmares and fairy tales alike. A scar ran from his temple through his eye to his bearded jaw, a brutal mark that should have made him terrifying. His features were harsh, weathered, framed by black hair streaked with silver that the rain had plastered to his skull. But his eyes, warm honey brown in the torchlight, held something she hadn't expected. Concern. Real, genuine concern for a stranger lying in the mud. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice gentler than his face suggested it should be. Wren managed a nod, too exhausted for words. An old woman appeared at the man's shoulder, her eyes milky white, her staff carved with glowing runes that pulsed with blue light despite the rain. She reached toward Wren's belly with a trembling hand, and the runes on her staff flared brilliant silver. The old woman staggered back as if struck. "My king." Her voice shook with something between awe and terror. 3 months ago, the vision showed me this woman's face. I saw her standing in rain and mud, carrying the child of prophecy. I have been searching for her ever since. She pressed her palm to Ren's belly, and the runes pulsed again. The child within her burns with the light of the old bloodlines, both northern and southern, united in one vessel. This is her. This is the mother we've been seeking. The man, the king, went very still. His eyes searched Ren's face as if looking for something he desperately needed to find. Then he slid his arms beneath her and lifted her from the mud as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "Set up camp," he ordered his soldiers. "We're not going anywhere tonight." Ren wanted to ask questions, demand explanations, fight against being carried by a stranger. But warmth was spreading through her from his body heat, and the fur cloak someone was wrapping around her shoulders. She had been cold for so long. The warmth was drugging, irresistible, pulling her toward darkness. She let her eyes close and, for the first time in 6 weeks, slept without fear. She woke in a proper bed with clean sheets and warm furs piled around her. For a long, disoriented moment she thought she was back in her father's house, that the nightmare had ended, that she would go downstairs and find him reading by the fire. Then memory crashed over her, and she sat up too quickly, her hand going to her belly. Still there, still growing, still alive. "Easy." A woman's voice, gentle but firm. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Ren looked around at stone walls hung with tapestries depicting wolves and battles, a fireplace crackling with warmth, narrow windows showing mountain peaks touched with snow so bright it hurt her eyes. Nothing she recognized. Nothing that explained how she'd gotten from a muddy road to what appeared to be a castle chamber. The woman sat beside the bed, middle-aged and competent-looking, with the practical clothing of a healer. She pressed a cup into Ren's hands. "Drink this. You're dehydrated, and the baby needs fluids. I'm Helga, by the way. I'll be looking after you." Ren drank, tasting honey and herbs and something she couldn't name, and felt her head begin to clear. Where am I? Ravencar Fortress, seat of the Northern Territories. Helga studied her with professional assessment. "The king brought you here 3 days ago. You've been sleeping most of that time. Your body needed the rest." "The king." Ren remembered concerned eyes and unexpected gentleness. "The man who found me. King Kale Ravenscar, also known as the Butcher King, though I wouldn't call him that to his face." Helga's mouth quirked with something like fond exasperation. "He's been asking about you. Quite frequently, actually. It's the most interest I've seen him take in anything except warfare in years." Ren's hand moved instinctively to her belly. "They said something about a prophecy, about my baby." Helga's expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral. "That's not for me to explain. The king will want to speak with you himself." She stood, gathering her supplies. "I'll have food sent. You need to eat. For both of you." After Helga left, Ren sat in the enormous bed and tried to process her situation. She was in a king's castle, a king known as the Butcher, whatever that meant, and apparently her unborn child featured in some kind of prophecy. It seemed impossible. She was nobody, a scribe's daughter, disowned and exiled, carrying a child conceived in circumstances she couldn't bear to examine too closely. What could her baby possibly mean to anyone except herself? But she had learned not to question salvation too closely. Whatever these people wanted from her, they had given her warmth and food and rest. She would take what they offered and figure out the cost later. She was still eating the breakfast that arrived. Actual food, fresh bread and cheese and fruit, more than she'd seen in weeks. When the door opened and a man entered. Not the king. This one was smaller, weathered, with a missing arm and a face that looked like it had seen too many battles. He moved with a warrior's economy, his remaining hand resting casually near the sword at his hip. "I'm Brennan Stormhold," he said, studying her with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "The king's shield. He's asked me to explain your situation." Ren set down her bread, suddenly not hungry. Then explain. Brennan's eyebrows rose slightly at her tone. She supposed most people didn't speak so bluntly to the king's personal guard, but he nodded and took a seat across from her. 3 months ago, our seer had a vision. She saw the face of a woman standing in rain and mud. Your face, Ren Ashford. She saw the child you carry, glowing with the light of united bloodlines. He watched her carefully as he spoke. A child born of rejection, raised in love and protection, who will unite the fractured bloodlines and end the ancient war between wolves. Ren's hands curled into fists, born of rejection. The seer's words, not mine. Brennan's voice was steady. When the king found you on the road, Elder Moira recognized you immediately. You matched the face from her vision exactly. Whatever circumstances brought you here, your child is the one the prophecy speaks of. And what does the king want with my child? Brennan was silent for a moment. The war between the northern and southern territories has lasted 3 generations. Thousands have died, villages burned, bloodlines extinguished, children orphaned. His jaw tightened. King Kale has spent his entire reign trying to end it. If this prophecy is true, if your child can unite the bloodlines and bring peace, then he'll do whatever it takes to protect both of you. Even if that means taking my baby from me. I won't lie to you. Brennan met her eyes without flinching. There are those who would argue the child belongs to the realm, not to you, that the prophecy's fulfillment is more important than your maternal rights. Fear coiled in Ren's chest. She had known there would be a cost. But, Brennan continued, King Kale is not one of them. He's made it clear that you and your child will be protected together. What happens after the birth will be your choice. He stood, moving toward the door. He'd like to speak with you himself if you're willing, not as king and subject, just as 2 people who need to understand each other. After he left, Ren sat in the warm chamber with her hands pressed to her belly and tried to decide what she believed. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Everyone who should have protected her had betrayed her instead. But she felt the flutter of movement beneath her palms, strong and steady. And she remembered the king's concerned eyes in the torchlight. Confused, unexpectedly human. She would hear what he had to say. The king's study was nothing like she expected. No throne, no intimidating display of power, just books lining every wall from floor to ceiling, a fire crackling in the hearth, and a desk buried under maps and correspondence. The man himself stood by the window with his back to her, tension visible in his massive shoulders. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning. His voice was rougher than she remembered, careful with each word. "Please, sit. Have you eaten?" Ren remained standing. "You wanted to speak with me." A long pause. Then he turned, and she got her first clear look at him in full light. The scar was worse than she'd realized, a brutal mark that made her wonder what kind of weapon could have left it. His features were harsh, all hard angles and weathered lines, but there was something in his eyes, a weariness that seemed too heavy for his years. He looked like a man who had been fighting for so long he'd forgotten what peace felt like. "I did." He moved to a chair near the fire, gesturing to its partner. "I won't stand on ceremony. We don't have time for it." Ren sat, mostly because her legs were still weak from weeks of malnutrition. "The prophecy. Your man told me about it. Brennan." A ghost of something that might have been affection crossed the king's face. "He's the only one who'll tell me the truth when I don't want to hear it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What do you want to know?" "What you want from my child." "I want the war to end." Simple, direct, spoken without guile. "I've buried too many soldiers, too many civilians, too many children who never had a chance to grow up. If your child can unite the bloodlines like the prophecy claims..." "Do you know what the child is? Boy or girl?" "The seer believes it's a girl." Strong heartbeat. active movements. His eyes dropped to her swollen abdomen, something almost wistful in his expression. She'll be a fighter. Ren didn't know what to do with the sudden tightness in her throat. She had imagined her child as abstract, as survival itself rather than a person. Hearing her described so concretely made her real in a way that was both wonderful and terrifying. I won't take her from you, the king's voice gentled. Whatever the prophecy says, whatever my counsel argues, she's your daughter. You'll decide her future. He paused. But I'm asking you to stay here. Let me protect you both until she's born. Let me give you safety, resources, time to recover from what you've been through. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. You're a king. You could just take what you want. His jaw tightened. Is that what you expect? After what you've been through? The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither of them spoke aloud. She realized he knew. Not the details, perhaps, but enough. He'd seen her condition when they found her, must have pieced together the circumstances that left a pregnant woman alone on a road to nowhere. I don't know what to expect, Ren admitted. Everyone who should have protected me has failed. Why should you be different? I probably won't be. His honesty startled her. I'm not a good man, Ren. I've killed more people than I can count. I've made decisions that haunt me. I've sacrificed pieces of my soul for this kingdom. He met her eyes. But I'm not in the habit of hurting pregnant women and stealing their children. If that's the bar you're measuring me against, I can clear it. Against her will, Ren felt her mouth twitch. That's not exactly a high bar. No, he agreed, but it's the one that matters right now. He stood moving back to the window. Stay. Rest. Let my healers take care of you. If you still don't trust me in a month, I'll give you resources and let you leave. And if I do trust you? He turned, and something complicated moved behind his eyes. Then we figure out the rest together. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Ren's life. She was given comfortable chambers with a real bed and a fireplace that the servants kept burning day and night. Regular meals arrived, real food, not scraps. Prepared with care and presented on fine plates, she was terrified to touch at first. Helga visited daily, clucking over her malnourishment, prescribing rest and rich food and tonics that tasted of herbs and honey. She was treated with respect by the servants, women who curtsied when she passed, men who bowed their heads and called her "my lady," as though she deserved the title. The courtiers watched her with cautious curiosity, their whispers following her through corridors but never quite reaching her ears. And the king kept appearing wherever she went. In the library, reaching for a book on the same shelf she was browsing. In the gardens, taking a walk at the exact moment she did. You're following me, she said finally, 2 weeks into her stay, finding him in the library for the 3rd time that day. I'm not. He didn't quite meet her eyes. The castle isn't that large. Is this your idea of courtship? Lingering near bookshelves? He stopped, his scarred face flushing slightly. I don't know what this is. Neither did she, but she found herself looking forward to their accidental meetings, to his awkward attempts at conversation, to the glimpses she caught of the man beneath the crown. He was well-read and quietly passionate about poetry, something he seemed embarrassed by. He sketched wolves in the margins of reports. He remembered the names of every servant and guard in the fortress, and he looked at her like she was something miraculous instead of something shameful. It terrified her, and thrilled her, and made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could learn to trust again. One evening, she found him alone in the great hall, staring at a massive tapestry depicting a battle from the war. The light from dying torches made his scar look deeper, his face more haunted. That was the Battle of Thornden Pass, he said without turning, somehow knowing she was there. 14 years ago, I was 19, my first real command. A pause. We won. It didn't feel like winning. Ren moved to stand beside him, studying the woven images of wolves and warriors and carnage. Why not? Because I had to kill my own people to do it. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. The enemy had turned some of our soldiers with dark magic, made them attack their own brothers. I had to give the order to cut them down. Men I'd grown up with. Men who'd taught me to fight. He turned to look at her. That's why they call me the Butcher. Not because I was cruel, but because I did what no one else could stomach. That sounds like strength to me. Does it? His laugh was bitter. Sometimes I think it broke something in me, made me less than human, made me someone who can only see duty and never— He stopped, his jaw tightening. Never what? His eyes met hers, warm and burning in the dim light. Never love, never family, never anything soft. Ren reached out and touched his arm, the first time she'd initiated contact between them. You're wrong. I've seen the way you are with your people, the way you know every servant's name, the way you grieve for those you couldn't save. Her hand slid down to cover his. That's not someone who's lost their humanity. That's someone who has more of it than they can bear. He stared at their joined hands as if he'd never seen anything so miraculous. Ren. Her name on his lips was a question and a prayer. Yes? But whatever he might have said was interrupted by a messenger bursting through the doors with news of a border attack, and the moment shattered like glass. Kale's warriors rode to defend a border village from raiders, soldiers from the southern territories striking deep into northern lands. Word came at dawn. They had arrived too late. Half the village destroyed, including children. The surviving soldiers were still hunting the enemy forces through the forests. By midday, survivors began trickling into Ravencar, hollow-eyed and silent. By evening, Kale still hadn't returned. She found him in the stables at midnight, still wearing his blood-crusted armor, sitting in the hay with his back against a post and his eyes staring at nothing. The horses shifted nervously in their stalls, sensing the grief that rolled off him like a physical thing. Go away, he said without looking at her. Ren sat down beside him instead. The hay prickled through her dress, and she could smell the copper and iron of dried blood, but she didn't move. I said, I heard you. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the horse's breathing and the wind outside. His breathing was ragged, uneven, the sound of someone barely holding together. Ren didn't offer platitudes. She knew they wouldn't help. She had received enough empty comfort in her own worst moments to know its worthlessness. I was too slow, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew the raiders were targeting border villages. I should have positioned forces better. I should have moved faster. I should have— You couldn't have known which village they'd hit. I'm the king. The words came out broken. Knowing is my job. Protecting them is my purpose. And I failed. He turned to look at her, and she saw the tears tracking through the dirt on his face, the devastation in his eyes. This was not the Butcher King. This was just a man carrying more weight than anyone should bear. The children, he whispered. There were children, Ren, and I was too slow to save them. She reached out without thinking and covered his hand with hers. He went utterly still, staring at the place where their skin touched, as if he'd never been touched gently in his life. Then, slowly, his fingers turned to grip hers. They sat like that until dawn crept through the stable doors, two wounded people holding on to each other in the dark, neither speaking, neither needing to. The next evening, he came to her chambers. He stood in the doorway, uncertain for the first time since she'd known him, looking less like a king than like a man who had lost his way. I wanted to thank you, he said, for last night. I don't know why I let you see me like that. Maybe because you needed someone to see. His jaw tightened. I've spent years making sure no one could see. It's dangerous, being vulnerable, People use it against you. I know. Ren gestured for him to come inside. My father used my love for him to protect himself. Vance used my trust to... She stopped, the words catching in her throat like thorns. You don't have to tell me. I want to. The realization surprised her. I've never told anyone what really happened, what he really did. She took a breath. It wasn't seduction. It wasn't me trapping him with false claims. He came to my room at night, and I told him no. And he... Her voice broke. He took what he wanted, and then he named me the liar for carrying the evidence. Kale's face transformed. Rage ignited in his eyes, his wolf surging visibly beneath his skin, his hands clenching into fists that looked capable of breaking stone. I'll kill him. No. Ren reached out and covered his fist with her palm. I didn't tell you so you could avenge me. I told you because I wanted you to know the truth. Because you trusted me with your pain, and I wanted to trust you with mine. Slowly, his fist uncurled beneath her hand. His fingers wove through hers, and he held on like she was an anchor in a storm. You're the strongest person I've ever met, he said quietly. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling strong. He lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. It's about surviving when everything tells you to stop. You're still here. You're still fighting. That's strength. The word love wasn't spoken. Not yet. But it hung in the air between them, taking shape, becoming real with every breath they shared. Whatever was growing between them was interrupted 3 days later when the Blackthorn delegation arrived. Ren watched from a gallery above the Great Hall as Vance Blackthorn strode in with his father's diplomatic party, moving with the easy confidence of someone who expected the world to arrange itself to his liking. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome, confident, utterly convinced of his own importance. Her stomach turned at the sight of him. Elder Moira appeared at her side, her blind eyes seeing things Ren couldn't. He's come for you. He knows you're here. How? Spies. Informants. Does it matter? Moira's hand found Ren's arm. The question is, what you'll do about it. Below, Vance was requesting a private audience with eloquent words and diplomatic courtesy. Kale granted it with cold formality, leading the delegation to a meeting chamber. Ren followed through the servants' passages, pressing her ear to the wall. She heard Vance make his demands, heard him call her property, heard him spin his lies with the same easy confidence he'd used to deceive her, painting himself as the wronged party, the victim of a scheming servant girl. But then she heard something that made her blood run cold. She carries my child, Vance said, his voice dripping with false concern. A child of the Southern Blackthorn bloodline. Word has reached us of your seer's prophecy, a child who will unite the bloodlines and end the war. You understand, of course, that such a child cannot be raised in Northern Territory alone. The Southern Packs have a claim. So that was it. Vance had thrown her away like garbage, but the moment her child became valuable, he wanted to reclaim his property. Not for love, not for fatherhood, for power. She heard Kale ask, his voice dangerously quiet. What does Ren say happened? Heard Vance dismiss the question with a laugh. She's a liar, a servant. Why would her word matter against a lord's? Something in Ren ignited. Months of fear and shame and running burned away, replaced by a fury so clean it felt like transformation. She emerged from the servants' passage and walked into the meeting chamber. Vance's face went white for a split second before his mask reassembled. You let her... I didn't let her anything. Kale's voice was ice. She came of her own will, and she'll speak of her own will. Ren stood in the center of the room, her chin high, her hands steady despite the racing of her heart. She looked at the men who had come to reclaim her like property and felt nothing but contempt. I want to tell you what happened, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Not what Lord Vance claims happened. The truth. She told it all. The night Vance came to her room. His hands on her, his weight on her protests ignored. The morning after, when he had smiled at her like nothing was wrong. Her pregnancy, her revelation, his lies. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Vance's mask had cracked, showing something ugly beneath. Fury and fear, and the desperate calculation of a man whose lies were unraveling. She's hysterical, he started. She's been through trauma, clearly. She's imagining. I believe her. Cale rose from his seat, and for the first time, Ren saw why they called him the Butcher King. He crossed the distance to Vance in 3 strides. His hand shot out and closed around the younger man's throat, lifting him off his feet with terrifying ease. Vance's guards moved to intervene, but Brennan and 2 northern warriors had blades at their throats before they could draw steel. You come into my hall, Cale said, his voice barely above a whisper, more frightening than any shout. And claim ownership of a woman you violated. You speak of rights and bloodlines while she carries the proof of your crime. His grip tightened, and Vance's face purpled. Give me one reason not to crush your windpipe right now. Vance couldn't speak, could barely breathe. His legs kicked uselessly in the air, his hands clawing at Cale's iron grip. My king. Brennan's voice was calm. If you kill him, we'll have war with Thornwood by morning. For a long moment, Cale didn't move. Ren could see the struggle in his eyes, the predator wanting blood, the king calculating costs. Then, slowly, he released his grip. Vance crumpled to the floor, gasping and clutching his bruised throat. This audience is concluded. Cale's voice was flat, empty of everything except cold command. You will leave my territory by dawn. If I ever see your face again, I will kill you slowly, and I will enjoy it. Vance fled with his delegation, gathering their belongings and riding through the night. But he didn't leave the territory. In the days that followed, Cale didn't celebrate his victory over Vance. Instead, he doubled the guard patrols and paced the corridors at night, certain that the threat hadn't truly passed. You haven't slept, Ren observed on the second night, finding him in his study with maps spread across every surface. He looked up, exhaustion and determination warring in his eyes. I'll sleep when I know you're safe. I am safe. You sent Vance away. I humiliated him in front of his men and denied him the prophecy child. Cale's jaw tightened. Men like Vance don't accept humiliation. They don't retreat and lick their wounds. They strike back when you least expect it. Ren crossed the study to stand beside him. You're expecting an attack. I'm preparing for one. He reached out, his scarred hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. Ren. The thought that he might try again. I can't let that happen. I won't. You're not just protecting the prophecy child, Ren said quietly. Are you? No. The word was fierce, immediate. I'm protecting you. The prophecy matters, but you matter more. She reached up and pressed her palm to his scarred cheek. He went utterly still, like a wild animal receiving an unexpected kindness. I believe you, she whispered. That night, for the first time, he held her while she slept. Nothing more than that. Just the warmth of his body curved around hers, his arm draped protectively over her belly. And in the morning, Ren woke feeling something she'd thought she'd never feel again. Safe. Truly safe. It lasted 3 more days. On the 3rd night, Ren woke in Cale's chambers to the sound of screaming from the corridor. She had been spending nights there, wrapped in his arms. Neither of them had spoken of what they were to each other, but they had stopped pretending it was nothing. Cale was already on his feet, claws extending, when Brennan burst through the door with blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Treachery, Brennan gasped. Captain Aldous, he's been taking Southern gold for months. He opened the servants' passage to Vance's men. They're in the fortress. Cale's face went cold. How many? 20, maybe more. They're converging on this wing. Get Ren to the safe room. The window behind them exploded inward. 3 men came through the shattered glass, blades drawn, moving with the coordination of trained killers. They had been climbing the tower while Brennan delivered his warning, a distraction to split their forces. Cale met the first attacker mid-leap, his half-shifted form a blur of claws and fury. He tore the man's throat out before they hit the ground, rolled, and came up slashing at the second. Blood sprayed across the tapestries. The third man dodged past the fight, heading straight for Ren. She grabbed the fire poker from beside the hearth, the only weapon in reach. The assassin laughed, raising his blade. "Come quietly, girl. Lord Vance wants you alive." He didn't say anything about unharmed. Ren swung the poker with every ounce of strength she had. The assassin blocked it easily, twisted, and the weapon went flying from her grip. His backhand caught her across the face and sent her staggering into the wall. He advanced, blade raised, and Ren thought, "Not like this. Not when I've finally found something worth living for." Then Brennan was there, his single arm driving a dagger into the assassin's kidney. The man screamed, twisted, and Brennan's second strike opened his throat. More attackers were pouring through the door now. Cale killed 2 more with brutal efficiency, but a third slipped past him, blade aimed at Ren's belly, at the child. She didn't think. She grabbed the fallen assassin's sword with hands that had never held a weapon, and she thrust it forward with all her weight behind it. The blade punched through the man's chest. His eyes went wide with shock. He looked down at the steel protruding from his body, then up at Ren, and crumpled. She stood there shaking, covered in blood that wasn't hers, as the last of the attackers fell to Cale's claws. "Are you hurt?" He was across the room in an instant, his hands running over her, checking for injuries. "The baby. We're fine." Her voice shook. "We're both fine." Dawn broke over a courtyard filled with captured enemies and their defeated leader. Vance Blackthorn, wounds still bleeding from his own failed assault on the main gate, was dragged before Cale and forced to his knees. Captain Aldous knelt beside him, the traitor who had sold his king for southern gold. The Butcher King looked at the men who had threatened his beloved, and his eyes held nothing but death. "You," he said to Aldous first, 30 years you served my family. My father trusted you. I trusted you." Aldous couldn't meet his eyes. "The war has to end, my king. The prophecy child, she could end it. The Southern Packs have as much claim to her as—" "She's not a claim." Cale's voice was quiet, more terrible for its calm. "She's a child. And her mother chose to be here." He gestured to his guards. "Take him to the cells. He'll face the council's justice." Then he turned to Vance. "Give me one reason not to kill you." Vance's composure had finally shattered completely. He looked terrified, pathetic, small. Nothing like the confident lordling who had destroyed Ren's life. "I'm the heir to Thornwood. My father will—" "Your father disavowed this attack the moment my messenger reached him." Cale's smile was sharp. "He values peace with the Northern Territories more than your worthless life. He's already named your younger brother as his new heir." Ren descended the steps and crossed the courtyard. The assembled wolves parted before her. She stopped in front of Vance, looking down at the man who had taken so much from her. "You tried to break me," she said quietly. "You failed." Something like hatred flickered in his eyes. Good. She wanted him to hate her. She wanted him to live with that hatred, to remember her face, to know that she had won. "Don't kill him," she said to Cale, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He doesn't deserve a warrior's death. Exile him. Strip him of name and pack. Let him live, knowing he lost everything while I gained a kingdom." Cale studied her for a long moment, something like pride warming his gaze. Then he nodded. "By decree of the Alpha King, Vance Blackthorn is stripped of name and territory. He is exiled to the wastelands, forbidden to return to any Pack's territory. His crimes against the woman I love are recorded, and any wolf who aids him will share his fate. The words settled over the crowd like a benediction. The woman I love. Ren felt them land in her chest, felt them take root. Vance was dragged away, screaming threats that no one listened to. The crowd dispersed, murmuring about the king's justice and his declaration. Kale's hand found Ren's, and their fingers intertwined. "You said you love me," she said quietly. "In front of everyone." "I did." His scarred face softened. "I should have said it sooner. I should have said it when we were alone, not in a declaration of judgment." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "I've been afraid of this. Afraid of caring for someone, of letting them close enough to hurt me. But you—" "I know." Ren stepped closer, pressing her palm to his chest. "I know because I've been afraid too." "And now?" She looked up at this man who had saved her, protected her, believed her when no one else would. The Butcher King with his gentle hands and haunted eyes, the scarred warrior who grieved over lost children and read poetry in secret. "Now I'm not afraid anymore." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. In the days that followed, they made their intentions official. Kale announced to the court that he would take Ren as his queen, and that her child, whatever the circumstances of conception, would be raised as a princess of Ravencar. The council protested at first, questioning the wisdom of elevating a disgraced exile and claiming another man's child as royal blood. Kale silenced them with a single look. "The child will be mine in every way that matters. I will be her father, and she will be my heir until such time as Ren and I have children of our own blood, if we choose to. Anyone who questions her legitimacy questions me." No one questioned him again. Word reached them that Aldrich Ashford had been quietly removed from his position as head scribe at Thornwood, not for any crime, but because his presence had become a liability after his daughter became the Northern Queen. He had reportedly descended into bitter obscurity, telling anyone who would listen that none of it was his fault, that he'd had no choice, that he was the real victim. Ren felt nothing when she heard the news. He had made his choice when it mattered. She owed him nothing now. 3 months later, spring came to Ravenscar, and Ren felt the first contractions as she walked in the garden with Kale. He carried her to Helga's chambers with terror barely hidden behind his composure, refusing to leave her side despite every tradition that said he should. Elder Moira appeared to pronounce that the child came during a rare celestial alignment, the prophecy's moment arriving exactly as foreseen. The labor was long and hard, but Ren had survived worse. She had survived betrayal and exile and weeks of desperate wandering. She had survived Vance's cruelty and her father's abandonment. She could survive this too. When her daughter finally came into the world, she glowed silver in Helga's hands. Just for a moment. Just a flash of power that hinted at the destiny to come. Then she was simply a baby. Small and perfect, and screaming at the indignity of birth. Kale held his daughter with hands that trembled. This man who had killed hundreds, who ruled a kingdom, who had never shown weakness to anyone except Ren. Tears streamed down his scarred face as he cradled the tiny girl. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you." Ren reached up and wiped the tears from his cheeks. "She has your stubbornness already. She came exactly when she decided to, celestial alignment or not." They named her Aurora, for the dawn that had brought them together and the new beginnings they would build. Aurora Ravenscar, daughter of the king and queen, child of prophecy, but first and always, simply their daughter. The war between North and South would not end overnight. There would be negotiations, treaties, old wounds that needed time to heal. But Aurora's birth had already changed things. The Southern Pax, hearing of the prophecy child born in northern lands, sent envoys rather than raiders. Peace talks that had stalled for decades suddenly found new life. The prophecy hadn't ended the war, but it had given both sides something they'd lost long ago: hope. As Ren held her baby in arms that would never let her go, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the rejection that had led to flight, the despair that had led to salvation, the scarred king who had seen value where everyone else saw shame. Her child was the reason she had been rejected. Her child was the reason she had found love. And whatever destiny Aurora grew into, she would do it surrounded by people who loved her, not for prophecy, not for power, but simply for herself. That was everything Ren had ever wanted.